The United States is inching closer and closer to defaulting on our massive $36 trillion of debt, which would have catastrophic consequences for not just the US government, but also for you and me and our everyday lives. How do I know that? Because of this letter, which I'm going to explain to you in this video, along with an interesting solution that President Trump and Senator Elizabeth Warren together have suggested. This is a deep dive video, so if you don't have time to watch it right now, favorite it, do whatever you have to do, and then come back to it when you have a few minutes. So I have been talking about the debt ceiling for years, but we have to talk about it again because the United States is on the verge of defaulting on our $36 trillion of debt. Again. So I'm going to explain why this keeps happening in a second, but first let's talk about this thing. According to this most recent letter from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he told House and Senate leaders after the 2025 tax season, the Treasury Department had crunched all the numbers, calculated all the money that came in from our taxes, and determined that without congressional action, the United States would run out of money to pay its bills by August. But since Congress is on recess in the month of August, the Treasury Secretary says he needs Congress to do something to stop the government from defaulting on the debt no later than mid-July. That's like a month and a half away. Now, I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about what I just said, so I'm going to answer all of them, including who are we actually in debt to? That's at the very end of this video, so definitely stick around. So let's start by talking about why the United States is constantly on the verge of defaulting on our debt. The Constitution puts Congress in charge of the purse, and one of the financial guardrails that Congress established for itself more than 100 years ago was the debt limit. So the debt limit represents the amount of money the federal government is allowed to borrow to pay its bills. And once the government hits that amount or hits what's called the debt ceiling, Congress needs to pass a new law that permits the Treasury Department to borrow more money to pay those bills. So Congress can do several things. They can either allow the Treasury Department to borrow a certain amount of money, or they can allow the Treasury Department to borrow however much money it needs for a certain amount of time, or Congress can just say, forget it. There is no debt limit. We're getting rid of it. Now, it's very important for you to understand when Congress raises or suspends the debt limit, that does not authorize new spending. It just allows the Treasury Department to pay the bills that Congress already racked up in the past. And for the record, no, this debt crisis is not the fault of any one president. Every president and every Congress over the last 100 years has contributed to this problem. So blaming it on one specific president is categorically incorrect. Don't do it. Now, it is true that certain presidents add more to the debt than others, but no one specific person is at fault for all of it. Now that we have that clear, let's talk about how defaulting on the federal debt will impact your life. I am not being dramatic. The facts are this. It would result in catastrophic consequences for financial markets, businesses, the federal government, and you and me. Millions of jobs would be wiped out, unemployment would spike, interest rates would spike, making your credit cards, your car loans, your personal loans, your mortgage super expensive. Inflation would spike. Again, the stock market would tank. So would your 401k. If you work for the federal government, you probably would be furloughed or have to work with no pay. Same for the military members. And if you rely on any government program like Social Security, disability, veterans benefits, SNAP, literally anything that comes from the federal government, those payments and benefits would likely stop, especially if there was no deal or law pending to raise or suspend the debt ceiling long term. The value of the dollar would drop on the world stage, and world markets would also take a hit. Let's just say it would be really bad. Congress established the debt ceiling, as I said, more than 100 years ago, to force lawmakers to look at themselves in the mirror every once in a while and really assess what's going on with their spending and our national debt. In theory, the debt ceiling is supposed to be there so lawmakers say, hey, maybe this debt is getting out of control and maybe we should rein it in. But instead, especially over the last few decades, there hasn't been much looking in the mirror, if you get what I mean. So the fact is the federal debt has ballooned to a whopping $36 trillion. That means Congress, over the decades, has spent trillions of dollars more than it has brought in revenue. And just like in your house, when you spend more money than you bring in, you accumulate debt. You also accumulate interest on that debt. And I hope you're sitting down for this next part. Guess how much the United States government spent on interest on our debt last year alone. In fiscal year 2024, the United States government spent more than $1 trillion on just interest on the debt. $1 trillion. Think of all the programs that the government could fund with $1 trillion. Instead, $1 trillion is going to pay interest. Now, as Secretary Bessent said, the bill on our debt and interest is coming due in August, and it's up to Congress to decide what happens next. The House did come up with a solution. In the House version of the big, beautiful bill that was just passed, House Republicans said we should raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. In the Senate, Republicans believe the debt ceiling should actually be raised by $5 trillion. Now, let me be clear. Right now, especially for conservative Republicans, those numbers are asinine. They hate this idea. And it's one of the big, beautiful bill's sticking points that is being debated big time in the Senate as we speak. Enter President Trump. As I have been reporting, come hell or high water, he wants the big, beautiful bill passed. But he knows the Senate and House Republicans are hung up on this debt ceiling stuff. So in a weird twist, last week, Trump made a suggestion and, to everyone's surprise, agreed with liberal Senator Elizabeth Warren. He floated the idea of just getting rid of the debt ceiling altogether. He wrote, "I am very pleased to announce that after all these years, I agree with Senator Elizabeth Warren on something. The debt limit should be entirely scrapped to prevent an economic catastrophe." So far, Senate Republicans have not committed to scrapping the debt ceiling, but it is on the table. I'll keep you posted on that. Lastly, so many of you have asked, who is the United States in debt to? The answer is mostly us. 70% of the U.S. public debt is owned by the U.S. government, investors like state and private pension funds, and the Federal Reserve. Just under 30% of that debt is owned by foreign entities and governments. The top 3 foreign governments that own U.S. debt are Japan, China, and the United Kingdom.